Good evening. Welcome to the Rational Radicals. Haven't heard from Skip, so I did have some things I needed him to go over. So if he's not here, we'll pick up some other time because I did want to have some discussion. I wanted to wish him, you know, the congratulations on another successful completion of Confederate Heritage Month, which is April, is Confederate Heritage Month, and April 26th, I believe, is Confederate Heritage Day. So they got a day, and within that month, they got a day. So anyway, I want to hope that Skip will make it through. And again, like I said, if he don't come through, we're going to bootleg his music. By the way, I was listening to some unreleased Skip Coon music, and he's really denying the world. I don't know what this dude is on, but I mean, listening to his album is some of the hottest lyricism, contextually, conceptually, lyricism and delivery. Some of the most ingenious music I've heard in quite some time. So, and it's unreleased. And I mean, I give it 5 mics already. I mean, my head was nodding. So, Skip, show up, and Skip, put the music out. The people need it. Especially we got these funny people bumping heads and stuff while everybody else is battling. You could swoop in and save the day. Anyway, thank you for tuning into the Rational Radicals. Again, I haven't heard from Scoop, combined. Call him Scoop for short. Anyway, I was going to go into some other things, Mississippi specific stuff, but again, I'd rather have Skip Coon as our resident Mississippi expert to talk about Jackson and Mississippi. So we'll hold that off. I want to talk about, because I went to yesterday, I was on the University of Chicago campus, and I went to the protest there. And even though it's not as large as some of the other student encampments, it's there. They camped out on the green. On the Chicago campus, I sat and listened to some speakers. I sat and looked around for some infiltrators and agents, which were there. And all in all, I would say, I commend those students. There's been some other actions on my son's college campus, and I commend the student movement. And even though when I was brought up to me earlier, I said, what took them so long? As far as student movements go, it took the student movement or the campus movement against the Vietnam War decades. It took the anti-apartheid movement to really it took them decades. So young people today, don't listen to old people like me saying, what took y'all so long? Because again, first of all, the Zionist genocide has been going on since I was born. And the Zionist genocide has been going on since before I was born. But even though it ain't been going on that long, because my grandmother and my great auntie are older. My grandmother's baby sister, my great aunt, is older than Israel. She was born into the world and going about her life under Jim Crow America before Israel was established as a nation. So Israel ain't that old, but it's a little older than me, but not by much. Like, Israel is young enough to where I could have dated Israel and Israel wouldn't have gone to jail. But I digress. So all I'm saying, for this particular atrocity, again, I also talk about atrocity hopping, shock and appall. But like I said, this particular movement for this particular atrocity or cluster of atrocities, it's actually moving faster. So Gen Z, Gen Y, whatever they calling these young folks, they are more astute at forming student movements quicker than when I was in college, or parents, because when I first went to college, the big movement at the time was it was Bill Clinton was in office, and it was the first Iraq War, and they were even entertaining reinstituting the draft. And I had a homeboy who graduated high school, and he didn't want to go into debt for college, so he said, I'm gonna go do 2, 3, 4 years in the military, come out with that GI Bill. And like, I think 2 days after he had enlisted, Bill Clinton had when Monica Lewinsky was scheduled to testify before Congress, he had called out bombing raids to attack Iraq, and because Monica Lewinsky, and it's real wild how the Democrats, but let me not get into that. So he went back to the recruiting officers like, yeah, give me back my paperwork. I ain't doing this shit. Y'all, Bill Clinton about to go to fucking war, put boots on the ground. And they said no, and his mother had to come, and it was almost a lawsuit. And then the recruitment officer almost got fired. So all of that. So again, like I said, the anti-apartheid college movement is decades behind the anti-Zionist college movement. All these movements are but again, if you go back to the founding, the initiation of the Zionist genocide, if you go back to the initiation, then we should have had campus movement. None of us can criticize, but if you just go back to October, that's a pretty rapid amount of time to have such a significant uprising. So anyway, I was over there, and I heard rumblings of anti-Semitism. And if you watch the Bro Diallo show Monday, a guy called in and suggested that I was promoting an anti-Semitic author. And I asked him where, because I read only 2 of the books of this particular author. And he said there's another book where he talks about Jewish supremacism, which is a thing. There is this concept of Jewish supremacism. And they had this concept of the Gentile or the Goyim, where they are God's chosen people. And you can't go around saying you're God's chosen people without having some concept of yourself being separate, apart, special, and even better than the masses. So that is not an alien concept, and it is not anti-Semitic to examine or to acknowledge the fact that Jewish supremacism, just as white supremacism or Christian supremacism, just about anything white folks get into, they start to create these unjust, unnatural hierarchies around what they do. But he suggested, oh, this is anti-Semitic. And so I asked the dude, can you define anti-Semitism? And he said, no, I can't, which I respect him admitting that. But it's weird because I did a whole show on anti-Semitism and where it comes from and why Black people are so vulnerable to the rhetoric of white anti-Semites. But here's the problem. Black people are under unrelenting attack from everybody. Bobby E. Wright said that anti-Blackness is the planet's only universal ideology. And so what happens is, depending on where we are, where we're oriented, what particular struggle or what particular orientation and focus you have as a Black person, someone can come to you and say, well, this group or that group or this group and that group is all against you or has harmed you. And you say, yeah. So if a Protestant comes to you, Christian, and say, well, the Jews. And we're like, well, everything from financing slave ships and providing financing for plantation owners to slumlording in the Black community, yes. But then again, a Jewish liberal or a Jewish progressive can come to you and say, well, look at the evangelicals. And you're like, oh yeah, the evangelicals. Or a Muslim can come to you and say, hey, Salam, my brother, look at the Christians and what the Jews. It's like, yeah, they're both white. They're both Western Europeans. Look at what they do. And then a Hindu can come to you and say, oh, you want to talk about the Christians and the Jews? Look at what the Muslims are doing. from Mauritania to Saudi Arabia and everywhere in between. Look at what it's like. The Muslims. And then an atheist, can come to you and like, oh, you listening to the Hindu tell you about the Muslims because the Hindus don't like, or the Muslims and India and Pakistan, so they beefing Muslims. And they can be like, let me tell you about the Muslims and their colorism and how bleaching creams and the races. So anybody can get you to hate on anybody. And many of the people that are trying to get black folks to hate on one person, anybody that's trying to get black people, are generally people who have also engaged in anti-blackness, racism, colonization, or neo-colonization. So it's our community, which I understand are susceptible to being what could be actually engaging in anti-Semitism or being all-out anti-Semitism, anti-Semites, or Islamophobia. Or you have an African nation that says, well, we're going to ban homosexuality. And then the UN and the International Court of Justice and NGOs will say, we're going to cut funding to this African country because they've outlawed homosexuality. And black folks are like, well, these colonial countries are trying to oppress Africa. And then on the other side of that is racist, right-wing evangelicals who literally, from the United States, from the colonial countries that went to Africa, set up the churches and wrote the legislation, literally writing laws to motivate one population of Africans to butcher and persecute another population of Africa. And we're picking sides between various oppressive forces. And we always find ourselves in between two oppressive forces. Who are we going to support? Let's say you got the imperialists who are murdering Indian of the Union Army, the imperious Native American killers, or the rebel Confederate enslavers. Who you with? You're going to fight against the Russian oligarchs, or you're going to side with the American corporatist? And so I understand that black people, it's not complex. But if you don't look at things holistically, if you allow yourself to be pigeonholed, if you don't look at things from an analytical, historical, and academic point of view, if you're going off of pure raw emotion, which I understand, you could either be like, fuck everybody, or fuck that particular group, and I'm gonna side with this group. You got so many black people saying, I don't want to be Christian, they enslaved my people, and then you convert to Islam. You got so many people saying the Democrats are taking us for granted, and then you go to the Republican. You were literally jumping back and forth between the fire pan and the fire. So in this situation, I always say revolution is an intellectual endeavor. Because if you don't have a grasp of the various layers and techniques, strategies, tactics of the various interests, of the various factions, the factions of resistance and the factions of oppression. And many factions of resistance want to engage in oppression. And the moment that faction of resistance will flip and become a faction of oppression the moment their particular oppression is. So, all that to say, black people, by and large, adopt sentiments that not only are inappropriate, inaccurate, but make us the puppet, make us the tool of other oppressive groups. And we foolishly think we are providing or offering resistance. We're offering resistance to one form of oppression while we give validation in our allegiance to another form of oppression. I say that all to say that every self-respecting, conscious black person, if you're anti-racist, if you're anti-imperialist, if you stand in solidarity with oppressed African people, Haiti, the millions of oppressed and displaced African people in Brazil, Guyana, throughout Latin America, Afro-Mexicanos, Africans throughout the Caribbean, Africans on the continent, the struggle in the Congo, the genocide in the Congo, the famine in Sudan, the imperial proxy wars being played out in Somalia, Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa. If you're in solidarity with all that and you want to function and think and understand how to be in solidarity with that, you have to be anti-Zionist. You have to be anti-Zionist. And you cannot be anti-Semitic. You can't be anti-Semitic. Now, some people might deprioritize that, be like, well, that's them. It's not them. That conflict in the Middle East was born out of imperialism. And it's the interconnected web of imperialism. The Zionist project is tied to the neo-colonial project taking place on the African continent. The weapons distribution manufacturing network, the intelligence distribution. Do you know how many coups d'etats, tyrants that the Israeli nation supported on the African continent? Do you know how the number one ally of white controlled minority rule apartheid South Africa, number one ally in the world was Israel? And Israel, the Zionist state, gave the South African apartheid government a nuclear bomb. And when Mandela took power, they said, give us our fucking bomb back. And he gave it back like a sucker he was. So I don't want to rehash what I talked about, but it does pain me to see Black people not being able to distinguish between geopolitical analysis, Pan-African and African interest and values, and baseline racist and anti-Semitic points of view. It hurts my heart because I know some of those people are fooled. Some of those people are fooled, manipulated, lied to by the likes of people like the Saudi-funded factions in our community, cults, Islamic cults in our community. So all I'm saying is, it is not only appropriate, it is your obligation as a conscious Black person to be anti-Zionist. And being anti-Zionist does it not contradict every other stance from the decolonization and solidarity with Africa and the unity and liberation of African people. Anti-Zionist is a key component of that. It is your obligation to be anti-Zionist, not simply a passive thing. And you go and find Kwame Ture gave a yearly talk. He spent all his time fighting to unite and liberate African people through the All African People's Revolutionary Party. But he would give a yearly talk giving our community an update on the evils of Zionism. But another thing I have to say is, if you allow yourself to be anti-Semitic or manipulated into articulating or advancing anti-Semitic ideas, then you are no longer an asset to your people. You're a puppet to our enemies. You are not an asset to your people. You're a puppet of our enemies. And I don't know where I did it. I don't think I need to rehash it to talk about specifically, because I was genuinely surprised when dude told me, yo, I don't know what anti-Semitism is. And here it is. I'm not going to rehash it, but you can check out Zionism, Capitalism, and Neo-imperialism. I talk about how the Anti-Semitism of Europe drove this whole Jews control the news, Jews control the entertainment industry, Jews don't work. Just all the shit that you think. It's all embedded in just the very concept and constant behavior of what is called Jew baiting in Western culture. That is white tribalism. And we cannot get entangled into white tribalism. And Europeans have hateration across the board for each other. They got beefs going back before slavery. They got beefs going back before the Roman Empire. They got beefs going back to the first earliest tribes and city-states of people who now have come to be known white. They got beefs going way back then. And we've been fooled into thinking, well, there are unified people who move as one, who are privileged people, a privileged supreme people who move as one. No, Europe is I'll say this and then I'll move on. Europe, it was a Western Europe, Central, and now I would even say wherever you find masses of white people. But Europe, which is not a fucking continent, how arrogant of them to even assert the European continent. Western Asia was a laboratory for atrocities. They had centuries to practice on us what they unleashed on the world, and they did it without hesitation. So anyway, let's move on. I wanted to talk about, because I listened twice. I listened to Kendrick Lamar. What's that? Euphoria. And because the reason I listened to Kendrick Lamar's Euphoria is because I heard everybody talking about it and I was seeing memes pop up about it. So out of pure curiosity, I was not a fan of Kendrick Lamar. To me, Kendrick Lamar, the only thing worse than a completely what Carlos Cooks would call these black people lumping. So they're black people with no political solidarity, no political stance or ideology, no political agenda. There are black people who are black, acknowledge they are black, but they only exist for pursuing their own individual goals, their own individual pleasures, their own individual safety. But they have no obligation or connection to any larger struggle, movement, or ideology related to the black people. And so Carlos Cooks, way back in the 20s, he was operating in the era of the Bolshevik and Menshevik uprising, the Bolshevik Revolution, the extermination of the Russian nobles, and the creation and formation and solidification of the Soviet Union. So everybody was very curious about this worldwide phenomenon. And so he basically, the lumping, Karl Marx in his dialectics basically described the very classes of men. And so we're pretty much aware of the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, even though each of those classes have subclasses. And so we know what the proletariat, we know what the bourgeoisie, we know what the petit bourgeoisie or the Pompadour class is. But there's another class that I don't hear talked about very much. And I don't think Marx was accurate in this, and we can't really blame Marx for being inaccurate. It was like 100 fucking years ago. What do you want from that man? But it was good for the time. And that's another thing where we'll read something in the modern era and be like, this is nothing. That could be absolutely revolutionary for its time. So I do think that we should use our modern intellects, our modern understanding, and our hindsight and insight to critique writings of the past. I don't think that writings of the past, I think if somebody pulls up a Bro Diallo show 100 years from now and they're like, this guy was off on this and that, I welcome it. I think it advances humanity. But one thing he talked about was you had the proletariat, which was the working class, the poor, the masses. And then you had what he called the lumpen proletariat. And the lumpen proletariat was basically the poor and working class people who had little to no revolutionary potential. And there was various reasons that they had little to no revolutionary potential, because Marx was advocating for a worldwide revolution where you would have literally a, what do you call a dictatorship of the working class or the proletariat. And so he felt that skilled craftsmen and guilds, workers who are industrial workers, he felt that industrial workers were the backbone of the revolution, because even though these people were much akin to the peasantry of the past, the peasants, they were literate, they were interconnected in ways that peasants weren't, because peasants were isolated pocket populations, and every duke or lord had his own little fiefdom where he had peasants and serfs that he ruled over, and many of them were interrelated incestuously, literally and figuratively. And he felt that proletariats, because they were metropolitan, they had a certain level of literacy and technical skills. They were able to navigate the modern world, comprehend the modern world. They had a consciousness of the politics. They had a consciousness of economics, because the serf, he would eat whatever he grew, and then he would give his taxes. He would grow something, and then he had to trade. That they were engaged in what Marx would call primitive socialism, not a market-based economy. Many of the serfs and peasants, they didn't really have manufactured or mass manufactured goods. What they would make most of their own tools, they would make most of their own clothing and built their own thatch huts, and what little they didn't make themselves, they would trade. Whereas the proletariat would work for a wage, and then take the wage and go and spend and engage the market in earnings. So he said, understanding the proletariat was conscious of his exploitation, understood, unlike the peasant, that the man who controls you, the manager, is not some god man, someone with royal blood, but just another man like you who's been given a title and a position. All that to say is, he saw that the components that made up the life of the industrial worker in the metropoles made for a potential revolution, someone you can engage intellectually, have an intellectual discussion about, explain to him not only the nature of his exploitation, but offer him alternatives for transforming the social relationships between him and the upper classes. Whereas the lumpen proletariat had no such potential. They weren't literate. They were very superstitious and afraid, of strangers. So most lumpen would live in a 5 to 10 mile radius and never see anybody besides their blood relatives and the local tax collector. So anyway, he called them the lumpen. And Carlos Cooks would just call black people, borrowing from that. Carlos Cooks would say, well, you had black people who were, all black people are oppressed, but you have certain populations of black people who have not just resentment for their oppression, but are willing to organize and coordinate their activities to address their oppression. Doesn't even have to be for revolution and liberation, but saying, hey, we can bring some relief to ourselves through our collective action. I'm willing to pool my resources. I'm willing to contribute some time. I'm willing to listen and gain a greater understanding. Then you had the lumpen, who was like, man, don't run that shit to me. I got to get mine. I'm just trying to get mine. So you had classes within classes. So anyway, probably went a little too deep in that. And, but anyway, let's get, you have these various classes of black people, and some have political or revolutionary potential. Some have none. Some have fervor and desire for liberation. Some only have a desire for comfort, safety, sexual gratification, and the accumulation of resources. So, I mean, it's kind of funny how that still goes to this day. But anyway, I want to get more into it. Which N-word? When I talk about the N-word, I'm talking about nigga. But anyway, my issue with Kendrick, and okay, let's get back to it. And why I bring up this lumpen is because Kendrick is lumping. And he's not lumping in the sense that he has no agenda, but Kendrick's ideology is reactionary. There are certain black people who acknowledge racism, acknowledge our struggle, acknowledge everything we go through. But if you look at their proposed solutions, and not just the ultimate outcome of their solution, but their means and path to getting there, it's not violent. Kendrick leans towards the Hebrew Israelite, and this is the thing, man. This blew me. And I didn't pay much attention to Kendrick. I thought he was just, I don't pay attention to younger rappers. I just don't. And I try to avoid even talking about younger rappers because that's not my. But anyway, Kendrick had come out with this crown, which made me sit up. He was wearing this Jesus crown, right? And it has it was made by Tiffany and Company, and it has 8,000 diamonds. It has 8,000 diamonds from Tiffany and Company, and it was the crown of Jesus. And you see, it ain't nothing but white hands. 47 karat sapphire. So anyway, he went and bought this crown, and I pay a lot of attention to black folks when they start to putting themselves, because first I would hear about Kendra, Pimp a Butterfly, and he was the new conscious rapper, and what's that dude's name? Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre said, now you got the crown for the East Coast, and he broke down crying because Dr. Dre and all the so-called East Coast, West Coast legends have said, now it's time for you to carry the West Coast. And he even said, no, I ain't carrying the West Coast. I'm carrying both coasts in my hand. And then, you know, he had that battle, and he was going against New York, and he was just, and I just looked from the periphery. I was not invested in none of that shit. But then when I started seeing him like put on a Jesus crown, and I know how Jesus affects my community, and I know how much a hindrance Jesus has been to black people's liberation. So I'm like, let me pay a little bit more attention to this. And I'm like, this dude, this is positive rap. This is conscious rap in 2024. Now, I know conscious rap in my day. Conscious rap with the nation of the gods and the earths. And a lot of problematic shit. But y'all had half a century to work this shit out. Didn't hip hop turn 50 this year? Hip hop turned 50 this year. And we still falling for this. This is still passing for consciousness or even pro-black. When the Hebrew Israelite belief system is anti-black. Black Hebrew Israelites are anti-African and anti-black. There is no educated, intelligent, self-respecting black person that will in any way validate. I have to tell you, the black Hebrew Israelites believed that our enslavement was not only prophesized, but African people provoked our own enslavement, and our enslavement was the just will of God. That African people of the diaspora were actually the true original Hebrew people. That we were enslaved in Egypt. We spent 40 years in the wilderness. That Moses, who was a black man, came down and the plagues and enacted the plagues and did battle with Pharaoh, who Africans were our enslavers. We're not African. The Hebrews do not accept that we are African people, and we are not of African descent. We are of the 12 tribes. And not only do they say we're not African, they have hostility. Just if you ever see them screaming on a street corner, just go ask them. But worse than that, they say we deserved it. It is a just and divine punishment, and we were worthy of worse. So we were in Africa, traveling through the wilderness. As we travel through the wilderness, we begin to mingle and intermingle amongst the Africans who were savage, who were heathen, who were pagan. And then they took us into slavery. And because we broke the covenant with Yahweh, Yahweh prophesied that we would be delivered up into our tormentors on slave ships and be brought to the new world. And we will remain under slavery and oppression until we uphold the covenant, till we acknowledge that we are God's chosen people, that we are the 12 tribes, and we begin to keep the Sabbath holy, and we begin to uphold the covenant that God made with us. This is what they believe. And the moment that the masses of African, the reason they go out on these street corners and scream at people is because they need to awaken us. And the moment that we all awaken and we come to the consciousness that we are the original Jews, we are the original people, we are God's chosen people, then Yahweh himself and Jesus will then descend from heaven and liberate us. But until that day that we wake up, everything we go through, all the little black boys in juvenile detention being exploited, brutalized, mutilated, all the African women, black women, I'm sorry, not African, all the black sleeping, the unconscious black women who don't accept that they're Hebrews, dying in the maternity unit, 5 times the rate. All the black men and women who were lynched, had their genitals mutilated, set on fire while they were alive, hung on display for their family members to see. All the Africans who were beaten and brutalized and bred like cattle throughout chattel slavery. It was all God's will, and it was all our fault. That's that fucking belief system. And because these black Hebrews, like Kendrick and the other people who dabble in different, because there's a lot of sects. There's a lot of black Hebrew sects. You have some that are very kind and passive, that talk very softly. You say, we're the original people. We got to wake up. I've worked with them. I know some personally. I've had some on this show that don't threaten people with violence, that don't speak aggressively. They just spread the word and try to awaken the 12 tribes. And you have, we all know the purple scripture eaters that show up in tassels and scream at us from street corners. But all versions of them have the fundamental relief. Slavery is something we were worthy of, we deserve, and it's our own fault. And this is weird because that's the same thing the European Christians said. The European Christians said the black man is cursed. The black man has the mark of Cain, our dark skin and our heathen culture. And in exchange for our labor and servitude, we will be given the light of Christ and civilization. Same thing with the Hamitic curse. We are Ham, and our brothers Shem and Japheth are the Christians and Jews. The white Christians and the white Jews are Ham and Japheth. Shem and Japheth. We are Ham. And when we got off the Noah's Ark, our ancestor Ham, the ancestor of all black people, saw Noah's nakedness and mocked our fathers. So he marked us with black skin and thick lips and big noses. He marked us so that other people could see we are the people of Scripture who were cursed, who were given life when God slaughtered all people in the world with the great flood. He gave us life and we mocked him. And so we are people with the mark of sin. Christianity, Judaism, and by extent, Kafir, Ab, the slave, because Judaism and Christianity were the germ seed for Islam. As Dr. Clark said, Islam is the most unoriginal world religion. It's nothing but a rehashing of Christianity, which was nothing more than a bastardization of Judaism. But I digress. So anyway, we take this shit mad casual. And I am very worried that it concerns me to see semi-literate, belligerent black men standing literally on soapboxes and corners spewing this shit. It's a problem. But when I see worldwide superstars, global, international superstars who spew this rhetoric, it gives me pause. So I could never call Kendrick a conscious or even pro-black. He's pro-slavery. He's anti-African by his fundamental ideology, since the last time I checked. And any black man walking around with a diamond encrusted crown, even let's say you're a Christian and you believe with your heart of heart Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, how is it not blasphemy for a man to wear a diamond encrusted crown of thorns? How is that? How was y'all cheering that? Huh? And Tiffany has been brought up by international NGOs about the blood diamonds. So those are fucking blood diamonds stripped out of the Congo. Black people were starting to come to consciousness about blood diamonds back in the 90s. The late 90s, early 2000s, black people was coming. And first of all, it became aware that diamonds aren't rare. They're quite common. They're not expensive. That it's a whole propaganda by De Beers and Tiffany and company created this whole thing. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Diamonds are forever. They created a whole propaganda campaign to fool all people, not just black folks, but all people, that diamonds were this rare and valuable mineral that you should not only buy, but spend as much money as you got on it. And just as people were coming to conscious, hip hop entered the diamond age. Instead of having gold teeth and truck jewelry, they started wearing diamond encrusted emblems and diamonds on their teeth. Diamond. And I'm like, they fucking using these fucking Uncle Tom handkerchief head buck dancing minstrel rappers to push diamonds on black people, because there were rumblings and awakening to how worthless and how unjust diamonds are. And the De Beers and information was coming out about, and then they even went and got Beyonce and put her in the big blood diamond. Are y'all crazy? But anyway, let's say you're a Christian. And you think I'm hellbound. Fine, I'll go to hell. I'll be in hell with all the twerkers and fornicators. I mean, besides the heat, it's going to be a party, y'all. How can you allow that? Let's say you're not a Christian. You don't believe in the divinity of Christ. Let's say you're a Muslim, where Jesus is not a God manifest in the flesh, but Jesus is Yeshua is a prophet, and prophets are to be exalted. Jesus was not a God himself, but touched by God and on a divine mission from God. So even as a Muslim, how could you fuck with a diamond encrusted crown of thorns? And I'm like, y'all just like, yeah, Kendrick. See, I take it personal that he was pushing this shit out here, just driving. So anyway, it's very curious that I would hear rumblings that Kendrick was a conscious rapper. Some people had better sense to say he's not conscious, but he's positive. And I'm like, he's lumping if you ask me. He's lumping if you ask me. And I don't even say it's contradiction, because I don't really think he's contradicting himself. But I hear shit like, oh, he has hundreds of millions of dollars, but he lives in a small, humble home, and he married this sister and this and that. I guess, man, if that's what it takes for y'all. But anyway, all that aside, I've been hearing about this beef and everybody ganging up on Drake. I ain't got nothing for Drake. Not a fan of Drake. I think Drake is corny as hell and whack as hell. And he's acting. He's acting like a rapper. That is a role. He is not a rap artist. He is he's a movie and screen artist. So I'm sorry, I don't know what the beef is. I just went and heard this song. And if you follow me across my other shows, the Bro Diallo show and the what's the other show? I don't know what I be doing. The Earn Your Liberation show coming to Baltimore. We Baltimore bound, y'all. If you look at that, Me and Jared had a big tete-a-tete concerning the N-word. Because Jared was has concluded, I don't know if I've changed him, but he for sure ain't changed me, that non-white people, non-black people, depending on the culture, community, and environment they came up in, should be able to say the N-word. And I say absolutely the fuck not. And Jared said, if you go back and watch it, I ain't gonna put no words into his mouth, was suggesting that me as a black man, if I could be in spaces where non-black people would use the N-word, and if I spoke up and objected to them using the N-word, I could be putting myself in harm's way. Now, I know he's not wrong about that, because I've been in situations similar to that. But what's ironic about that is when I did speak up about using the N-word, it was the other black people who came at me. Now, there are some people, the anti-N-word crusaders. I have nothing but love for them. I'm not critiquing them, but there are some people that they don't say it, but the way they come at it, they kind of suggest if we stop saying the N-word, that would be a solution to everything. If black people stop saying the N-word, because, and let me say, Kendrick Lamar, if you listen to Euphoria, he said that he hates how Drake uses the N-word. He hates that Drake uses the N-word, and I agree with him on that. You know, some mixed, biracial Canadian, where the fuck you getting that shit from? But then people started saying Fat Joe shouldn't use the N-word, which I'm like, oh, welcome to the motherfucking club. I was in this lonely fucking box. I first visited New York in '85. I've been listening to hip hop since I can remember, since I have memory. Roxanne Shante, Busy Bee, Curtis Blow, even MC Blowfire, Rap Dirty. I was listening to rap since back when you could send children 5 or 6 years old. I remember my mama's boyfriend used to smoke Cool Mile Lights, and he'd be sitting there and say, "Go run up to Mama Dale's and give me a pack of Cool Mile Lights." And if I brought back, because they had like 50 fucking versions of Cool cigarettes, because old heads smoke Cools. These young cats smoked the Newports, but that's how old I am. I go back before Newports took over the hood. So I'd be 4, 5, 6, and this is when 5-year-olds could run up to the street. 5, 6, and up the street is anything in a 5-mile radius for kids. When I was a kid, up the street meant anything within a 5 fucking mile radius. Run up the street, run up to Mama Dale, give me a pack of Cool Mile Lights, and I'd have like $1.25. Sometimes that cheap bastard would give me exact change. And I go slap that on the counter, and you had to slide it under the little thing because they were behind protective glass, which later found out it wasn't even bulletproof. It was plexiglass. The fuck? Not that I would have robbed them if I knew, but I'm just saying, Mama Dale's had, they might still have that plexiglass up. Let me not put their business out there, Mama Dale. I run up to Mama Dale's, slide the thing under the plexiglass, which I thought was bulletproof because why else had that big fucking glass in the store, and they slide the cigarettes back and run back, not have to pay a fucking, nobody asked for ID. That's how old I am, and I've been listening to hip hop since back when then. I remember my very first rap concert was Fat Boys and their Crushing Tour. Shout out to Uncle Chris. When was that? And it was unbelievable. 1987. That was my very first rap concert. And I get kind of confused because Dougie Fresh came too. But the problem with Dougie Fresh is he was performing at this theme park called Worlds of Fun. So it was like up there, but this concert was like at Kemper Arena. And he came with Salt and Pepper, and that when they were wearing them bomber leather jackets, but under the bomber leather jackets, they had the skin tight Catwoman suit, and they was skin tight, and they throw off them jackets, and them girls would be on there, and they be dancing around in knee pads. So it was Fat Boys. It's like 87. Man, it was like 50 acts, and my mind was blown. But so I've been in hip hop for a long time. And from day one, I went to New York. I think my first time in New York was maybe 85, 86. I was there for like 4 or 5 days visiting with my people there. And I'm like, I gotta move here. This is where rapping. This is hip hop. I used to think, because I'd buy all this conscious progressive hip hop, that nobody in New York City ate pork. Nobody in New York, people didn't eat. I remember when my first homie, I was in, we went to a pizza party and I still was eating cheese. And you get them big, it was $1. You get a big square of floppy thin New York pizza and they fold that shit up and eat it. And I was like, yo, dog, Rich, you got pepperoni on your pizza. And he's like, I'm like, it got pork in it. It's like, the fuck? Of course it has pork in it. I paid. And so I was under the impression New Yorkers didn't eat pork. I thought they were all 5%ers. Anyway, when I went to New York, it's the first time in my whole life that a non-black person looked me dead in the face and said, nigga. Never had that experience all my time living in Missouri. Growing up in Kansas City on the state line. I'd be over in Wyandotte County, rural Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, where they used to have the UMKC campus, going up there for games and concerts and chase girls, going out to Blue Springs to go to the Blue Springs Mall to chase girls, going to Silver Dollar City in the Ozarks and riding tubes, going to Lake of the Ozarks, going to Kanakuk, down on the Missouri-Tennessee border. And in all my life, never had a non-black person casually turn to me and be like, yo, nigga, pass the ball. But let me tell you one thing I had been preparing for my entire fucking life. What I would do if a white man ever called me the N-word. I had been preparing in my mind and my heart. Because I had 5 uncles. All of them big, burly alpha males. And they always kind of thought I was off. I didn't like watching sports. I like watching nature documentaries. I didn't play sports. I ran cross country, which to them wasn't a sport, even though I was captain of the varsity cross country team my sophomore year. Never happened in the history of Bishop Hogan, but I did it. They didn't give me no props for that. My younger brother, he was a ball champion, 4-year scholarship, D1 basketball athlete. And now his son, and so they always thought I was off. I got my brother got a varsity letter in basketball. I got a varsity letter in theater. So my uncles always thought, man, damn. So I was like, one day I'll prove to my uncles, all of them. I'm 6'3". I'm 6'3". All my uncles are 6 foot and change. The ones that are still alive, 2 of them have passed on to glory. But all my uncles 6 something change. But they like if I stood behind my uncles, you wouldn't see me. And I always knew one day I'm gonna prove to them that I deserve, because these are the Jefferson boys. And my grandmother, she was lazy. She had 6 kids. She didn't have time to be looking up names. So it's Clint, Chris, Carl, Keith, and Kirk. Clint, Chris, Carl, that's their names. And so they were the Jefferson boys. And I was always in their shadow. And I used to be, when I was a kid growing up, I'd be like, I'm gonna tell my uncle. And dudes like, your uncles ain't gonna do shit because they gonna just bring you back. And they did it. I used to run home and tell my uncle they done ran us from the court. And then he'd take me up there and be like, all right, whoop his ass. And I'm like, if I could have whooped his ass, I wouldn't be looking to you. So I just knew that it's best to keep it on the low. But I knew one day I'm going to prove to my big uncles that I deserve to be, that I can take the baton, I can inherit the crown, And so I knew, I'm like, well, I may not be able to throw hands like Jeb. I may not, have the style and the turntable skills of Uncle Clint, I may not have the arsenal of Uncle Chris, who had every gun in the world, but I got the consciousness. And so if anybody ever called me an N-word, any of these rednecks, any of these white boys, any boy, let me tell you, it's going down. And so I had my chance. I'm playing basketball, Brooklyn, and I'm not trying to brag. I was literally in Park Slope, Brooklyn. I wasn't in Bedford-Stuyvesant, the livest one. I wasn't in the Boogie Down. I wasn't even in Ebbetsfield, where I normally go play basketball in Ebbetsfield, because they just have all these courts. It was always a game. I wasn't over in Ebbetsfield. I wasn't even over on Fulton, which is a part I love over there, where they used to have sticks and stones. And I was in Park Slope. That was pre-gentrification Brooklyn. This is Brooklyn's of the late 80s, early 90s. But this incident happened in 1992. I made it all the way to 92 without having to deal with this shit. And I'm in Park Slope. I was coming from the food co-op. And I saw these dudes had a game, and I'm like, let me get on, because they was running a full court game. So let me get out there, run a few before I go home and saute this tofu. So I'm on the court, 1992. It's on the weekend. I'm working hard, doing really well. In college, first making something of myself. I'm playing ball. I know I don't have the best handles in the world, and I don't have the best outside shot, but my defense and inside games is impetuous. So I play my role. I had this unstoppable set shot. I knew how to post up in the paint. Wasn't nobody going up on me. I'd lock down I knew my skill set. I had a very particular skill set in basketball, and I just worked on like 3 things a lot to make myself an asset to my team. I wasn't the glory dude. Did you scoop it to me under the hoop? I could stuff it. I had this little set shot. If you drive in and you get choked up, you kick it out to me. I had this set shot. But if I was anywhere outside the 2-point range, it ain't going in. But this one day, I figure, let me just try something new. So I bring down a rebound, and I take it coast to coast. Choke through the legs, choke. And then when they all get to the other side, I know I don't have the handling skills to go through that maze and try to stuff it or lay up. So I said, I'm going to take this 3-pointer. I post back, take the 3-point, brick like a motherfucker. And there was a dude. I come to later find out he was Puerto Rican. And he said, nigga, next time pass the fucking rock. Pass the rock. And then nobody responded. It was like 85, 90% black dudes. Everybody started running back towards the other court. Ball switch. And I yell, who the fuck you calling a nigga? And I said, for every nigga I am, use a spick. And everybody froze. The kids at the ice cream truck, everybody just, whoa! And all the black dudes come around me in a semicircle. And like, yo, son, you not from around here, yo. It ain't like that, yo. I know you're not from here. You're not from here, yo. We don't do that, yo. I'm like, we don't do what? We don't do what? He called me the N-word. And that was my first orientation towards New York City cats. Not only allowed, because Puerto Rican is not a race. You have white Puerto Ricans. You have black Puerto Ricans. You have Taino native Puerto Ricans. You have even some Asian Puerto Ricans. Puerto Rican was a port city. And so in port cities, you have all. Puerto Rico is a nationality. It's not a race. You could be of any race and be Puerto Rican. You could be of literally any racial category or a mixture of any race and be full-fledged Puerto Rican. But the people who run Puerto Rico are conquistadors, are the white Puerto Rico. Same thing for Mexicans. Same thing for Latino and Hispanics. That is a regional designation, not a DNA, thing. And so I'm in New York and I'm in the Village. I'm fully steeped in the hip hop community and I'm standing in ciphers and I'm seeing Asians, I ain't even gonna run down the list. I'm seeing all manner of people who would not be, by anybody's standards, have an African or black phenotype using the N words. Washington Square Park, they spitting lyrics. Fat Joe came out, and I remember you gotta flow, gotta let them know, Joe. And then I heard he used the N word. And then there's this rapper called Immortal Technique, who I hear is revolutionary, and he came out with this album, Revolutionary Volume 1, Revolutionary Volume 2. And I was like, oh, I got to get that. And so one time I'm out and about and I see this CD, Revolutionary Volume 2. And I wanted Volume 1, but I'm like, let me get it. And I'm like, wow, this guy could rap, but he keeps using the N word. And then some people tell me, oh, no, Mortal Technique's a black man. And I'm like, yeah, that's not what he says in this album. And so I'm like, listen, y'all do y'all. This ain't even, like I said, as I'm going to talk about, I'm not even that invested. But don't bring that shit to me. It's not alien to me. I understand it, but I want no parts of it. I remember my junior year, I was a member of the Stop the Violence Coalition, and Mariah Carey had just dropped that song, Vision of Love. And there we were doing this neighborhood to neighborhood initiative where we had this talk, and we had a short performance and just this whole thing to stop all the violence in Kansas City and its surrounding areas. And the Stop Violence Coalition decided to, let's bring some singers on. Let's make a whole performance of it. So they brought in these girls from neighboring high school, Wyandotte County high schools, and they would sing. And they had kind of did this rendition of Vision of Love. And there was this girl who was Mexican, native Mexican. And we dated. I dated this Mexican girl for like 3 weeks over the summer. We would go out to eat. I took her to the plaza. And if you are from Kansas City, you knew what it meant to take a girl all the way over to the goddamn plaza. I took her to the Crown Center. You know, I did what I do, because, a lady, get with the bro Diallo, she gonna see good times, right? And I had a little bit of money. I had next to no money, but I was working the Boys and Girls Club. I was a block brother. I was a volunteer for the Stop the Violence Coalition, and I was an organizer for the Stop the Violence Coalition. I was a member and a coordinator for the Youth Volunteer Corps. I was a very active young person trying to save Black folks in my very liberal days. And I would go over to the West Side. First time I've ever spent any time on the West Side. And I'd be over there, and the Mexicans would be over there calling each other, not to be offensive, but I would just listen to their conversations, their back and forth, their camaraderie. They would say things. They would make jokes about La Migra and immigration status. They would call each other like beaner and wetback and all those type of slurs within their community, with affection and camaraderie and humor. They would use those slurs. And I'd be sitting on her porch, flanked by their brothers. Because, it was no hanky-panky. This was a good Catholic girl. Because, Mexicans and Catholicism, they, for some reason, but they came to Catholicism the same way we came to Protestantism. But anyway, I'm sitting there, and I'm seeing them interact. And I've never really been this casual or this cool around Mexicans. I never had issues with them, but I had my part of town. I'm out on 75th and Prospect. I don't even know where that was, the West Side, the barrio. And I'm like, they used to say all the same language. But one thing, I never had a desire to use their lingo, their slang, their terminology, their slurs. I had no desire. Oh, I should be able to say one too. I've never had a desire. I don't know what it is to be outside of a group or a community and have a desire or motivation to use their terms. I found out that every single group, I went to, I was thinking, I had an aunt. She wanted me to go to medical school. She figured if you can, you should. She was like, you should go to medical school. So I started taking pre-med classes just to examine. I was like, okay. So I enrolled in the Brooklyn College pre-med program, and I was kind of just roaming around, being 21, 22. I had finished my program at Downstate State University. I finished that program, and I was just kind of roaming around New York in my world famous Jabro jeans and my run over Nike Air Maxes. I would never wear Jordans. I was too righteous to wear Jordans. I was too ethical to consume Jordans. But I had me some fly ass Air Maxes. And they were red, white, blue, and black. The kind with the full on elastic. I've never been a sneakerhead, but those were like the most expensive pair of sneakers I ever had. You know, and I'm coming from a dude whose mama was buying me Spaldings. I would have to rock Spaldings when all my homies had Jordans and shit. So I have no shame to that game. I suffered enough to have them Air Maxes, but they weren't Jordans. I would not wear Jordans then or now. But anyway, I went to the school, and Brooklyn College was known as the Little Red Schoolhouse. And it was called the Little Red Schoolhouse because it was a very liberal school that was predominantly Jewish, very large Jewish population in the heart of, like, if you know about the areas, the white areas of Brooklyn, Bensonhurst, Canarsie, and all that, outside of like the black area. So it's kind of out there by Coney Island. So I'm out there, and I don't know. I know I should be talking more formally, but let's just wrap. Skip ain't here, so we ain't got to follow no rules. So anyway, I'm out there, and at this time I was very active. I was very militant. I was out there fighting and for liberation, and was going to over this when I was part of this secular cult, the Sons of Man. And we were all raw food is vegan. I got to tell y'all about when I was a member of a cult. Shit was wild. So I'm down there, and there was a large Palestinian population there and a very large Jewish student body. And I would see there was a very popular, this is again back when they were print. Like if you wanted to do a newsletter, you had to fucking lay that shit out and print it, paper. People didn't have like cell phones and internet and social media and all that. So there was this magazine, this indie magazine called Hebe magazine, that was produced by Jewish. And so I started hanging out with the Jewish Bolsheviks, the Marxists, the anarchist students. I started hanging out with the Palestinian and Arab student bodies and just discussing, you know, I'm talking about racism and decolonization, and they're talking about anti-Zionism, and the Jewish students were actually talking about, at this time, the Soviet Union had recently dissolved, and they were fighting because a lot of Jewish people, they were fighting about the right of return, and a lot of Jewish people were trying to determine whether they want to migrate out of the Soviet bloc and go to Israel, or migrate to the U.S. and just a lot of political activity going on in the 90s into the 2000s. And the first World Trade Center bombing had happened. Not 9/11, but prior to 9/11, there was a truck laced with explosive driven into the basement of one of the towers and parked by this support pillar, and they blew up the truck, and it was supposed to collapse one pillar into the other. That's why when Biggie Smalls, before he died, was like, blow up like the World Trade, born thinner, he was talking about that first explosion. It wasn't prophetic. But anyway, I would be around these Jewish students. They had this popular independent radical magazine called Hebe magazine, and all the Jewish students would engage and speak with each other and use all the slurs, all the stereotypes that we all know, that we all heard about Jews, and penny pinching and Shylock, and the Jews, the young Jewish hipsters, the young Jewish radicals, the young Jewish activists would all just casually use those slurs and language. And I'd overhear it, never had a motivation or desire to use any of that or participate in that component. Even though we debate, we talk politics, we talk way back then, talk about Israel legitimacy or illegitimacy. We had all those discussions. Same thing with the Muslim students. Just about every community that I go around. I knew a Cuban guy, had a good Cuban friend, and used to work with. Same thing. Not only do they all have slurs that they use with each other, they all have slurs for people. You look at a population of white people, and you'd be like, bunch of white folks. But if you lend an ear and don't speak, you'll find that if they're Irish, they don't like the Northern Irish, don't like the Southern Irish. The Catholic Irish don't like the Protestant Irish. You know, the secular Irish don't like the religious Irish. The Irish unificationists don't like the Irish nationalists. They all fucking Irish, and they all have slurs and terms for each other. Same thing with the Italians, and how the Italians on the mainland feel about the Sicilians. Even Spanish. I'm taking Spanish classes, and I had a woman who was from Spain, and her biggest pet peeve is when someone would call her Latina or Hispanic, that if you didn't see with her dark hair and her olive skin, she looked like a Latina, and she is like, I am a European, and she had utter disdain. She is like, I come from a Mediterranean culture. We don't eat South American food. We don't consume pork and put cheese on every goddamn thing. We are a Mediterranean culture. We eat olives and fish. And everybody was like, oh, she's a Spanish teacher. In America, she must be from Mexico? No, Argentina, Panama. And she was from Spain. And she had utter disdain from all things so-called Latina, and felt that Latin America was diminishing because it was so prominent when people hear Spanish or Spanish speaking. And so I took 2 semesters with her, and I had to use, and in high school, I was taking Spanish, but from a Latin American, Mexican Spanish. And European Spanish has its own set of rules. So I thought, yeah, I'll take Spanish and just coast right through this shit, get these language credits. I know I ain't about to learn a foreign language. I'm an American. God damn it, what I look like speaking 2 languages. But I thought I just fall back on my high school Spanish to get my college Spanish. I'm straight. No, that couldn't happen because this woman's hostility. So I'm saying that all to say, Black people are not unique in the fact that internally we use slurs. You can look at another Black page, nigga, please. And them niggas, man, I can't stand niggas. All groups do that. Now, there is the thing that African culture has been commodified and worldwide, and that African culture is something that is mimicked and resonates with all other cultures. Motherfuckers, hey, I think J. Rooted Damager said it best. You mock my appearance, yet yearn for my essence. The whole world hates us, but yearns for our essence. Every time I watch a fucking movie, I don't give a fuck what kind of movie. It could be an action sci-fi movie. It can be a romance movie. It can be a slapstick comedy. Whenever they want to portray coolness or masculinity, it's always Black music as the soundtrack. Every fucking time. To the point where my wife and I, every time we watch a movie, oh, cue the Black music. And it could be no Black people on the cast, no a white director, white executive producers, white grips, white cameraman, white boom mic holders, white catering company. Ain't a Black person nowhere near that movie set. Ain't white folks that ain't no Black people couldn't even do security. But the moment they want to portray coolness or toughness and masculinity in any fucking movie, here comes the bass-laden heavy Black music. And I'm like, oh, cue the Black music. And I'm like, why not play a guitar riff? Or some drums? What the fuck? So I understand why Black people tend to think we are unique in this whole, the N-word, the N-word, the N-word. But the reality is, I was just watching Japanese basketball players. It was a compilation. No, it wasn't Japanese, it was Chinese. I don't know if you saw it. It was on Instagram. But they were showing Chinese people practicing basketball, and they had this dude trying to drive. And their whole movements looked like they were playing in a schoolyard in the South Bronx. So, Black sounds, and it didn't start with hip hop. jazz music, R&B, soul, rhythm, funk. It's kind of like everywhere you go, it's like Chinese food and African culture, African rhythms, African drums. And it's not even unique to Black Americans. You go to the farthest corners of the world. You go to the farthest corners of the world where a Black person couldn't name it or spell it or find it on the map. And you find non-Black people, Rastafari, yes I, Jah. And their hair is straight as a bone, and they have to mat that shit, putting beeswax and Elmer's glue to get their hair to mat. Jah love. I've been there. I got a passport. I've been some places. And you ain't even got to leave the country. You go to rural Kansas. Go burn a spliff. Like, how the fuck? You ain't never left the territory of Kansas, let alone been to the Caribbean. What? How? Afro beats, Fela, everywhere. So I understand. Where you been? No, he's absconded. No call, no show. That's Skip. That's what happens when you hire a Mississippian. You ain't been able to get an honest day's work out of a Mississippi Negro since the end of Jim Crow. I know I'm getting in trouble for saying that. You throw me out, huh? I'm a Mississippi. Oh, you are from Mississippi. My wife's from Mississippi. God damn it. So anyway, I'll let you know if he come through. Yeah, I'm here for Jeff. Yeah, well, he's not here tonight. Next time. What did you go to the store for? What did you go to the store for? All right. Anyway, there's 2 points I want to make to this. Yes, the N-word is pervasive and universal, and we should fight it. We should take a stand. If not for ourselves, for our ancestors. I do not think it's the end of the world that the word is used amongst us. I don't think Black people are unique. If you spend any time around, I had a guy, a white liberal, one of my first white friends. Dare I say my only white friends? I don't know. I think I have some white friends. I have to find them. Yeah, I haven't been a good friend to my white friends. I only pull them out when I get accused of being anti-white, reverse racist. But I'm going to reach out. I had a white friend named Brian. And he was like Irish, Scottish, or some weird shit. But he used to have a family crest. You know, a poor white boy. And I was invited to his house, and motherfuckers was playing the bagpipes and shit. You know, where Black folks, my uncle was a DJ, DMSR. My Uncle Clint would DJ. I go to his house and their music, their live is a fucking bagpipe. But anyway, they would sit there, and once the drinks start flowing and the bland food, you know, was all consumed, they'd start talking reckless as fuck. And the Irish side of his family, would be talking all this Mick and alcoholism and won't work, just talking all the right. And then the Scottish side, he was Irish, Scottish and shit, would start talking about how belligerent Scotsman is, and then the Irish and the Scots sides of the family start going in on each other, saying some of the most vile shit about each other, all white on white. And some people might argue, well, it's not in their music. When the last time you done nodded your head to some Irish or Scottish music? Because one thing, I don't listen to country music, but all I hear is white slurs throughout country music. It's just not as good as hip hop. It's not as universal as Black sound. It doesn't resonate. In fact, Black people got to return and take back country if you want it to go worldwide. Because white country, redneck, cousin fucker, you know, all the same shit. So anyway, we're not uniquely pathological in that way. But now I want to say something else. So the people who are like, we got to stop saying the N-word, us using the N-word amongst each other is not the source of our oppression. It is not the source for other racist hostility and predatory relationships with us. And not saying the N-word is the solution. I got black people that I know love me and know got my back, and every other word is N-word towards me. And I got other black people who will never let their word cross their lips out of respect for their ancestors. I understand and I sympathize with both camp, and I have respect for the black people who don't say the word. In fact, I remember one time a young man from my neighborhood, when I was a block brother, came up to me and was like, you know what I like about you and why I look up to you? And I'm like, why? He said, I never hear you say nigga. I didn't even know I wasn't saying it. I didn't even consciously make it. It just wasn't in my vocabulary. You know, and this is at a time when I was a teenager where I was deliberately and consciously trying to expand my vocabulary. Because I used to listen to cassette tapes. I didn't even have CDs back then. I listened to cassette tapes of Malcolm and Stokely Carmichael. That's what I knew him was way back when. And I wanted to be able to, you know, enunciate and articulate like they did. But anyway, we're not uniquely pathological in that. But I draw the line at any person who cannot be identified phenotypically, culturally, ideologically, historically, Black, African, using that word. And I am happy that even if it took somebody as problematic and reactionary as Kendrick Lamar has reinvigorated, and I hope that it is sustained, where we don't play that shit. I mean, I gotta admit, it was hurtful, and it bothered me for many days that I had to go back and forth with Jared. And y'all go tell him I call his name. This is what Del Jones used to say. This is criticism with affection, that he would try to articulate or argue that a non-Black person should ever be excused or allowed. And we shouldn't even play that who can say it and who can't. Nobody. Just as I do not advocate or allow for Black people, and I can sit across from a Latino person. I can sit across from a person of Jewish descent. I can sit across from an Italian. Oh, there's so many anti-Italian slurs. Just go watch the goddamn Godfather movies. They use more Italian slurs than racist slurs. And I could sit amongst people from all cultures, Asians, I've heard, you know, and I could sit, and not just Asians. You ask a Korean what they think about a Japanese. Or you ask a Japanese person what they think about a Korean person. That's bad blood. And ask all of them what they think about the dark-skinned Indonesians and the black-skinned Vietnamese who are as dark as me, if not darker. Polynesians and Samoans. You ask them. They all, but let me tell you, there's a line. I have no interest, no desire to participate in the internal language, because there is a universal language that we all speak. If I got a problem with a person who is Latino or Latinx, whether they are white, because you can be Latino, you look at Japanese, there are a bunch of Japanese and Chinese people. You know, you Trinidadians, you ever met a Trinidadian Indian? I know the slurs for them too. The Guyanese Indians have their own special slurs. I have no desire or interest in using any of that. Even in friendship, in jest, in camaraderie, nor in hostility. I do not use racial slurs against people. Not because of them, but because of who I am. And I don't do it in hostility. I don't do it in camaraderie or jest. And I think we should offer all races that, and we should accept no less from any other race. And believe you me, if you're letting them do it to your face, they're doing something worse behind your back. We all know that. We all human. So you think, oh, I'm just really cool with these white guys. They just use it, rap along with it. If they're saying shit, if they're saying reckless shit, I know some white boys, you couldn't pay them to use that word. They might say it when I'm out, but it's like there was a book, Black Robes, White Justice. And in the introduction of that book, wonderful book, I got to review that. I got to get back on my book review. Where a black man, was walking down the street and had a minor confrontation with a white man. And the white man called him the N-word with the hard ER. So he grabbed the white man by the collar and said, "What did you say to me?" And he called him the N-word again. So he pulled out a straight razor, slashed his face, and slashed him until his face was almost unrecognizable. And so this man was arrested. This is a true story. So the man was arrested and taken into custody. And he went to trial and was found guilty. So he was being sentenced. And at his sentence, there was a victim impact statement. And then they asked him, before I sentence you and throw you away and throw you in jail, throw away the key, do you have any words you want to say? And he was like, that man called me the N-word. So I have no apologies and no remorse. And so the judge said to him, don't you know after what you did to him, you disfigured this man? Whenever he looks at the mirror and sees his scars and sees his disfigured face, he's going to call you that word? And the brother looked dead at the judge and said, I bet not hear him. One of my favorite stories. Shout out to Judge Wright. Man, they don't make judges like that no more. That brother, better than Thurgood, he should have went to the Supreme Court. I bet not hear him. So all I'm saying is we should give no less and take no better. And in our community, when we engage with black folks, because it doesn't, maybe I'm just broken. I grew up hearing that word. My grandma would use it. My uncles would all use, we all just would throw that shit around. And music I listened to, and so, but one thing I never saw, even my uncles, nobody in my family would accept that from anybody other than black folks they knew, and they knew they was close to. Because even if it's a black person you don't know come at you with that, pistols might have to come out or fisticuffs. So I'm just saying, regardless of what your position is, there should be some universal standards and codes. And if it took Kendrick Lamar, he's a weirdo. If it took him to reignite this discussion, then I appreciate it. And now I want to just open the discussion up to everyone else. And I know I've been kind of informal tonight, but I had some things specific I wanted to talk to Skip about. And since he didn't show up, I didn't really want to get into it because I really want to get his insights on this. So I don't want to offer any spoilers. So I know this probably wasn't the most informative Rational Radical show, but blame Skip. Neely Fuller defined the N-word and said an N-word is any person who is subject to the will, to the whims of the system of white supremacy. Now, I'm just quoting him. I just had it. God damn it. My wife comes and gets my books. I just had that book and I'm like, oh yeah. Anyway, code system concept. Code system concept. He said that's what you can, whether you use the word or not. And Dick Gregory, and so black people being subject to the whims and the will of white folks is what deems us the N-word. And again, despite one thing we have to understand in the debate and wherever we fall in this debate, I think there's two things that shouldn't be up for. First of all, Nobody from outside our race should be allowed to use that word in our presence or at us. And we better not fucking hear about it if they do. And I fuck cancellation. I say obliteration. If not for yourself, for your goddamn ancestors. That's one. Number two, regardless as we crusade to stop the word or reduce the word, number two, we understand it's not the cause of the problem and it's not the solution. Not saying that it's unimportant or that the fight against the word is unnecessary, but that's that. It's not a panacea. And there's another point. I don't even know if I want to get into that one because that will take us down another road. But can we at least do that? Can we at least do that? And I think that if you do encounter a brother or a sister and say, I don't play that shit, I think we should respect that as well. And counter racism is not engaging in slurs and dehumanization, which I've done of other people. And the third point is we are not unique in using slurs internally or taking words that were used to attack us as a people, our race, our culture, our community, and using it amongst ourselves. We are not unique in that. And if you can find a population that doesn't engage in that in some way or another, then let me know, including the dominant white society. Like I said, white people got more slurs for other white people. I promise you. White people got more slurs for other white people. I bet you the average British man has more slurs for the average Swedish man than they have for us. We are not uniquely in that. Not justifying it or tearing it down. That's just a reality, because a lot of times we do get this notion that we are uniquely dysfunctional, and we are not in that respect or in most other respects. So anyway, with that, we're going to bootleg some Skip Coon. And we'll come back for a short questions, comments, and criticism. We good with that? That work for y'all? Because it sure enough worked for me. What in the world? Okay, like I said, Skip ain't here with us physically, but he's here with us in spirit. So we're going to bootleg some Skip Coon, and I'll be back shortly. Oh, wait, whoa. Sorry. I know. I'm not going to indulge because I know. Because some of y'all, before you even say it, I played that one last week. I know. I love it. But there is this one where Skip made for me. He said he was singing to me when he made this. So we're going to listen to the other one. I know. I keep playing the same ones that I heard before, but I'm going to play it different. That's the one we bootlegged from last week. This is Atheist by the Absentee. Skip. Oh wait, so many buttons here. Like, do we need this many fucking buttons? Atheist by Skip Coon on the wonderful classic. This is called Miles Garbage.
God ain't in the cameras and satellites, withholding vaccinations or exploiting water rights. God married Jesus white, make a rapper antichrist. God is love, honor, and accepted sacrifice. So I will love, live, fight, read, speak right. Love of other people, black stars shining bright. Illuminating dark night, sky shot, bang, bullet fly. Son, father, brother die. Sister, mother, lover cry. I fight the system, y'all justify. I tell the truth with my pen, rappers rather lie. Them wear their masks like Tom Cruise in Vanilla Sky. Enjoy the devil pie, I run with rebels, I see freedom in the pupil of the brownest eye. Wonder how Africans saw that Mississippi moaning sky. Then running to the cliff, how am I the only catcher in the rye? I see the truth and the beauty in the stripper thigh. I heard this song, so I asked them why. Say why you feel that it's God's will, you would die. No reply, see him stargazing. Can't hear me cause the music loud and the blunt blazing. He's scared to use the tools God gave him. We all grapes, whether wine or raisins. They gave us Nixon, Bush, and Ronnie Reagan. Back to work, Bernie took me for my save-ins. I ran hard and can't lift my son out the playpen. This system built these use you up, then it spits you out. They'll fire warning shots after they have chalked you out. They'll make you slave to give you God. What is that about? Them give you bad map and tell you you can make it out. If Canada is to your north, then you in the south. And you a slave if you in the field or in the house. If Canada is to your north, then you in the south. And you a slave if you in the field or in the house.
Right. It's with us in spirit. So, y'all ready for some questions, comments, criticisms? Where's the thing? Oh, here it is. So many buttons here. Every freaking I use this thing in it. All right, the link is in the comments. Shout out to Abdul Aziz. Much respect to you, Bro Diallo. I'm an atheist and I've learned a lot from you these past few months. Appreciate you too. Really inspirational and motivating at the same time. Bro Diallo, hey, I heard Gerald Horn talking concrete versus well historically researched positions that always remind me of the points you make in every show, citing all of your favorite authors. Well, I appreciate that. Put me up there with the living icons. Kofi, question, comment, criticism. You're live with Bro Diallo on the Rational Radicals.
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, second time up here. I love how you covered the N-word. Basically, I think you touched all the layers and all the angles of how people would, approach the usage of it. And I really appreciate your self-reflection. And that's where I'm going to pretty much give a comment here. So me being of Guyanese descent, because you're right, Guyanese people, Trinidadian people, we have our own slurs. But the thing about your self-reflection that me as a Guyanese American growing up here, and someone as a Caribbean American, in the Caribbean and in Guyana, we don't use that word at all. We know of the word, but we don't use that word. So only time that word will be used if a Indian person or a Portuguese, some of the white people there, which is very minimum, but the white people, little white people there or the Chinese there, they would say black in a derogatory way, or if they really want to take it home, they would use the N-word. So we don't use that word. So here in New York, where I'm from, you have Americans and a lot of Caribbean people that are here. I'm in a barbershop, the barbershop, people talk shit, whatever, stuff like that. This guy say, yeah, my nigga this, my nigga that, blah, 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 blah. And then his wife came, and his wife was Jamaican, and he started speaking in his Jamaican accent patois. So I was like, oh, I thought you were American. Me and him started talking. I said, I thought you were American. He was like, why did you think I was American? Because I heard you talking and you saying my nigga this and then my nigga this and da. We said in Jamaica and Caribbean people, we don't talk like that, And he was like, you know what, you're right, and I need to stop doing that. Me growing up here, I used to say it all the time, but at least I was cognizant of the fact not to say it around white people, because I know in turn I'm really making myself look bad. But I haven't used that word in way over 2 decades, right? So that's one point I want to use. And another thing, yes, other groups do say derogatory things towards each other, but as you well know, I'm not trying to say you try to put a parallel on the word versus Guinea or Gook or whatever racial word, but that word is tied to a history that those other groups don't have. So yeah, we'll take umbrance to it, and it hits a little bit harder than if someone else would use that particular word among themselves. So again, I'm more on the side of I would use that word to describe the mentality of a black person, right? Because my proverb is that a nigga is nothing but a broken African. Because we all knew when that word was,
So,
yeah.
but
No, go ahead.
actually, broken Africans were the ones who were behaved appropriately. The rebellious Africans were just, I mean, a broken in from, if you're going to go from the historical context, they considered you broken if you were well behaved.
Exactly. It's called Draketomania. They
So
thought you were
right,
insane.
right. So the Africans who would draw the ire, well, they called us all the N-word. We were all subhuman. But when you say a broken African, generally, I think because back when they would talk about, I don't want no broke boy, you broke, but actually the Africans who have the material resources, status, formal educations are actually the broken ones. Those who submit were broken in or broken. And those who resisted, misbehaved, the rebellious, the ones
Yes.
wild. So the wild or untamed and broken is the opposite. So a lot of times, a lot of wild dudes, we call them, oh, they broke or they don't behave themselves. But that even gets muddy.
Yeah, just like in the Maroons in Jamaica, they like one thing that we do is say we're just supposed to call your hair like your locks, supposed to be your locks. Locks, just means hair, right? But when they saw the Maroons and Jamaicans, they called it dreadlocks. So dreadlocks is a derogatory word for those Maroons, right? And some of us still use the word dreadlocks. But when I was talking about broken, I mean mentally, because we know that in America, in the hemisphere, in the United States, in Central and South and the Caribbean in America, their job was a so-called nigger factory, right? So it was always this resistance of first generational Africans brought here, and from first generation and second generation on, that's where that struggle were, because when you look at it,
it sounds like, Kofi, it sounds like you're leaning towards the Chris Rock, there's a difference between black people and niggas.
Correct.
That's not correct, though.
How so?
There is, first of all, from the perspective of our oppressor, Chris Rock said that white people don't like niggas, but black people don't like niggas either. So when you take that perspective, you're aligning yourself with white people.
No, not when it comes to that. Not when it comes to that.
That's the perspective, because from a root analysis, regardless of how we feel about each other internally or the behaviors of any individual black person, there is no difference as far as from the perspective from the systems and institutions of global white domination. There is no difference between black people and niggas. It is synonymous, and it is inappropriate and incorrect for the oppressed masses of black people to try to distinguish ourselves in our own eyes and in the eyes of our oppressors and say, no, I'm not like the bad blacks.
No, I totally agree. I think I'm more coming from the perspective of not fulfilling so-called racial stereotypes, as far as like, so after post-Civil War, remember, after Civil War, after Birth of a Nation, all the things that white people are, because when people say, well, white people are the real niggas, because everything they say we are, they really are.
Yes.
Since Birth of a Nation, they want to kill us. They want to rape you. That's all the things they were doing us in slavery.
But again, what does that have to do about black internal relationships, black internal hierarchies, and black internal distinctions?
Well, I'm not looking at internally, because I know internally as a black person, that's not who we are. But as black people on the world stage, as far as using that word, especially me, I'm against of using that word as a term of endearment, because I'm not, by me using that word from
as a denunciation or dismissal or distancing yourself between black people who engage in behaviors that you think are unbecoming.
in a stereotypical fashion. Yes, but I
Name the
know.
stereotype.
Well, basic black stereotypes. Black people are lazy. Black people are intellectually inferior. Black people are
So
unintelligent.
if
For
you
example,
encounter a lazy and intellectually inferior black person, you would call them a nigga or see them as a nigga?
no, no, no. So to me, a person where I will call a nigga mentally would be like your Jesse Lee Petersons, people like that, where they actually
But he's not
repeat.
lazy. Would you define him as lazy? He's a race traitor.
Well, yeah. So, but he believes in all the stereotypes that white races will put out about black
I
people.
know what he thinks. I'm very familiar with him and his contradictions and his self-hatred. But when you
Yes,
were suggesting that you say that there's a different, or that there are some black people who do behave like niggas, right?
in that manner. Yes.
And you're and so you would call Jesse Lee Peterson a nigga.
No, not. Not if I was to formally meet Jesse Lee Peterson and I'll disrespect the
But you
man and
can
just call him.
one.
I said he's mentally that way, so I know who I'm dealing with.
I'm not trying to talk about them. I'm talking about your classifications and terminations. I'm not trying to talk
Yes.
about what he is and what he ain't. I'm asking about your classifications and your terminology.
Yes, I would deem him as one. Yes, yes.
And you believe, from your point of view, that Jesse Lee Peterson is a nigga.
Yes.
But
He
doesn't
checks
fit
off
those
the boxes.
stereotypes. But wait. Jesse Lee Peterson doesn't fit the stereotypes. In fact, Jesse Lee Peterson lives his life as an upstanding, hardworking, patriotic American. That's not a black. Jesse Peterson does not live according to the stereotypes.
Well, if there's 5 boxes there that they will attribute what
What other I asked you to name the stereotypes, and you named 2 stereotypes that I wouldn't define as despicable as Jesse Lee Peterson is. I don't think he fits those stereotypes. So what stereotypes does Jesse Lee Peterson fit?
Jesse Lee Peterson fits a stereotype that pretty much, like, when I remember when he was on Dr. Phil, he was basically saying that far as like how we think about white people. So he would say person like, hey,
wait a second. Jesse Lee Peterson would agree with you. You are articulating the same positions and views as Jesse Lee Peterson.
In what manner?
You said that you don't use the N-word, but you reserve the N-word for black people who fit particular stereotypes. And those particular, correct. I asked you to name the stereotypes, and you said laziness and intellectually inferior. And yes. Jesse Lee Peterson states that the black masses are lazy and the black masses are inferior, and there are upstanding and appropriate and proper blacks who are accepted and embraced by whites, and the other blacks who can't get ahead in society due to their own internal dysfunction are the N-words.
Well, as of lately, you are right until towards the end of your statement, because as of lately, from what I heard, he was on Dr. Phil one time a long time ago.
Talk about Dr. Phil. I just want you.
No. I'm not talking about. No, hold on. I'm not talking about Dr. Phil. I'm talking about a statement that he said when he was on the Dr. Phil show about the relationship between black people and white people. He said that white people need to make more babies because if this country doesn't make more white babies, this country is going.
That's not relevant to our discussion. Here's the core of our discussion. You state that you don't normally use the N-word, but there is a population or a set of behaviors that black people can engage in where you will deem them worthy or consider them to be the N-word. Am I wrong?
Mentally, with certain things that they subscribe to, yes.
Yes. And then when I asked you for examples, you gave laziness and intellectual inferiority.
Correct.
And then you used Jesse Lee Peterson, Jesse Lee Peterson, everything that you said, even though you try to condemn and criticize him, everything you said, you agree with. You and Jesse Lee Peterson both believe that there is a class or a classification of black people who are lazy and inferior and all these other stereotypes.
No. I didn't say.
Yourself
I didn't say there's a class of black people that are lazy. You asked me what
about the
you asked me
stereotype.
what the yes, you asked me about what the stereotype is, and I told you what it was. I didn't say those are people that exist. You're saying those people exist. I'm saying what the stereotype is,
So you
and
think
people that may fit that stereotype.
Who are the black people you deem worthy of the N-word, or consider behave like the N-word?
So like I said, people like Jesse Lee Peterson that think that white superiority is
now you're flipping it. Now you're flipping it.
No, I'm not. I'm giving you different examples of Jesse Lee Peterson.
Black people who are lazy, intellectually inferior, and subscribe to the concept of white supremacy.
No, black people who think that they're intellectually inferior. Black people who hold white people.
You've met a black person who says, "Hey, I think I'm intellectually inferior."
No, I have met black people like Jesse Lee Peterson that says that if we don't have more white babies, then this country is going to go to hell because black people have not produced anything. I'm talking about Jesse Lee Peterson, who said that slavery was bad, but thank God for slavery, we're here in America.
I'm very familiar with Jesse Lee Peterson. Besides him, who else do you deem worthy of the N-word or behaves like the N-word?
Fortunately, not that many people will be like.
I know you got to have one more. So 1 billion black people on this planet.
There's a lot of black people like, yeah, but Jesse Lee Peterson comes to mind right now. There's not other people. Do I have two? So mostly anyone that's like you have like a Candace Owens. If you're talking about
Candace Owens and Jesse Lee Peterson from your classification are N-words.
Well, when you have someone that
yes or no?
Mentally, yes, in their narrative and what they're speaking and what they speak.
And we, you and I, are not N-words.
Due to our how we see ourselves,
are lazy, intellectually inferior, and they subscribe to white supremacy. Let me just give some clarity.
Okay.
You have internal. You have our internal views, our internal relationships, and you have external relationships. So amongst ourselves as African people, we do have various factions, various divergence, various ideas, but we're all African people.
Correct.
Inside that box, none of us are niggas. Even the Uncle Toms, even the sellouts, even black conservatives, none of us are.
So how would you reconcile?
There is nothing within the systems and institutions of white hegemony and capitalism that distinguishes us.
How so? So you're saying that if Fox News wanted a contributor, Dr. Umar Johnson and Candace Owens is on the equal playing field just because they're black?
Candace Owens and Dr. Fubar. Yes. I mean, yeah, of course, black people, we all have a common line. We're all of one people. Now, we're all oppressed, and we have various different reactions and responses to that oppression. But one thing we should not fall to is using white definitions to explain black phenomenon. We cannot use white definitions to explain white phenomenon. So as white people begin to divide us between those are good niggers and bad, broken and tame, those are conclusions and analysis about the behaviors of African people that do not serve to strengthen, unite, liberate, or distinguish us. So I do believe that we have to draw distinctions between Africans who are liberation-minded, Africans who are united, Africans who are reactionary, Africans who have more loyalty and love for their oppressors than their people, Africans who will engage in overt rejection of all things black. I do think we need those distinctions, but we cannot use white definitions to explain black phenomenon. So if we're going to talk about a Jesse Lee Peterson, it is not appropriate, nor does it work for us to say he's a nigga and we black folks, or he's a nigga and we're Africans.
Well,
That
no,
does not
one.
inform us, that does not advance us, and that does not provide us clarity. So you can
Okay,
call
so
him,
you don't.
allow me to finish, Kofi. If you want to be technical, you can say he's conservative, you can say he's reactionary. If you want to be less formal, you can say he is a race traitor, you can say he is a coon, you can say he is self-hating. But if you go and get the terminology, the slur that blankets our whole race, and try to say, well, no, the white man is right. Some of us is niggas and some of us ain't. That does not serve us. That validates our enemies. So I understand trying to draw a line or a distinction. I don't think you're being honest when you say Jesse Lee Peterson and Candace Owens are the ones you call. I think you were being more honest when you were talking about lazy black people who sag their pants and wear acrylic nails. I think you had more of a classist point of view, but I think you at least are smart enough to be dishonest about that conclusion and pretend like you're talking about black conservatives are the N-word, but I've never heard that. But it's all good. All I'm saying is you are right in the fact that we need to draw a line and make a very strict and hard distinction between liberation-minded Africans and race traitors. But we cannot use the white terms and the white mentality to help us understand or grasp that divergence or understand who they are and why they did it. So all I'm telling you to do is use more appropriate terminology. And there are several texts written, from the miseducation of the Negro to the black bourgeoisie. And there's even a book called Race Traitor that you can read and use a more African-centered, conscious revolutionary analysis in order to draw that distinction. But you cannot say, well, they's niggas and we's ain't. Do not use white definitions and white terminology to define black phenomenon, even if it's a black phenomenon that was provoked or caused by white folks. And I think we'll leave it at that because I got a lot of people on the line. Kofi, I appreciate you calling in. You want to leave us with a sentence or two?
Yeah, I would like to respond to what you said.
It's got to be
pretty
two
much.
sentences.
I mean, wow, you said a lot. I agree with what you're saying, and yes, we should separate it, but I'm talking more to the mentality, not to the culture or to how white people think of us. I mean, if they're niggers or not, they're still our people. But I mean, you articulately stated that way. We need to use other words that's not so inflammatory to say, hey, yeah, they're our people, but they're not like-minded like us. So, but thank you for pretty much letting me know and keep doing your thing. I like what you're doing.
Please tune in and bang in again. Peace. I agree with you, Andy. Dr. Fubar isn't as bad as Candace Owens, and I do think there is a chance that Dr. Fubar can go from being a reactionary to being a true revolutionary. I don't think there's any hope for Candace and Jesse Lee Peterson. Percy, I appreciate your patience, question, comment, criticism.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Well, one, I just want to, let you express my gratitude for your program. This is kind of weird, but I live in the Chicagoland area, and I was actually walking one day, and I believe I walked past you and Dr. Mungo while you all were walking down the street. I think it was down 53rd or 55th. And you were talking
Hyde Park,
something.
yes. I was about to say, well, you see, yes, in the nicer neighborhood, yes, we do like to stroll through the affluent areas and pretend like we belong.
And it was funny because I had no idea who you were, but y'all were talking about something, and I heard your voice, and I was like, man, what they talking about? I kind of want to know. Then, lo and behold, a few weeks later, here I go find you on Facebook or on YouTube. So I know, you're not spiritual or anything, but I know I feel like there's something to that.
All right, so next time you see me, man, come up and say hello. You know, I be in these streets.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I'll be in Bronzeville and Hyde Park and all that, but I'm in the suburbs.
I don't live in Hyde Park, but I'm close enough where I can go and pretend like I belong.
Right.
I mean, that's where they got the organic oatmeal lattes and the Whole Foods and the tofu, man. Soon as they bring the tofu over to this side of King Drive, then I won't be over there no more. But until then, I appreciate you personally.
I feel that. But yeah, I also just wanted to ask a quick question too.
Sure.
So I pretty much grew up in I had a very mixed up upbringing where, I grew up in a lot of the suburbs around Chicago. And then I went into school in a more predominantly Black student environment within Chicago. Then I was yanked out of that to where I was put into Orange County, California, where I was one of 10. And I was, I'm very ambiguous in my look. but because of how I was raised, I was never, I never wanted to shy away from my blackness. And so, there were a lot of times where, I would actually get those other slurs you were talking about. And I'm like, yo, hold up, you're using the wrong slur on me. They call me, like wetback and stuff like that. I'm like, yo, what? And then I just go through. But it's interesting that, we're having this conversation now with Kendrick and Drake, because those are also two, influential artists that, were big when I was, in my younger teens. And so, but I always found myself always gravitating towards like Kendrick's and stuff. And I think it was also a little bit of light skin self-hate, trying to overcompensate, be like, nah, man, Drake's wet. Like, that all my friends would be like, nah, you bugging, bro. You bugging.
Drake is black though, but it ain't because of his complexion.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not even his complexion. It's that there's a whole lot of things as I've understood more about things politically and, just class conscious, growing in my class consciousness.
Right.
And I just wanted to ask you, like, how does it, because it sounds like your family dynamic is similar to my family dynamic in a sense where, you're surrounded by a lot of, maybe socially liberal in some ways, but mostly very conservative, very religious, people very, very country. A lot of my family, they from Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. So it's all that Bible. And so it's like trying to, navigate and show them how this isn't where we need to be. But I can't really give them anything to show them where to go, if that makes sense.
Right. Were you asking me how to turn your own people around?
Yeah, in a way.
Let me tell you, point them towards somebody other than you that can articulate what you want them to know. That's the best. I got a nephew-in-law who went vegan, and he came here. Him and my niece and my great nieces and nephews were coming here, and they stopped by here on their way up to Detroit. And my wife made them a vegan meal. And he had that vegan meal, and for like 3 years, he was like, "Man, that was a great meal." I like, and like 2-3 years later, he went vegan. And then but for a decade before that, I was like telling them, get off the swine and get refined. You act like you're blind. So the best way to convince your family is to accurately and appropriately live out your ideas, and then just be good family to them. And they'll pick up where they are because they know you. And so, I want my family to be vegan. I want my family to be revolutionary. I want my family to be all these things. I want them to abandon Christ and their deep-seated Christian religion. And for my older brothers and even my own father, I want them to stop worshiping Allah and bumping their heads on the floor at the mosque. But they understand my position. When they want to engage the topics, I engage it with all due respect, because many of them are my elders. And then I just live my life appropriate. I love them. I commune with them. I coordinate, cooperate, share with them, and I'm just family with them. So you articulate your positions. I know their limitations, the lines they don't want to cross. I know mine, and that's it. And they will make their way there themselves. And generally, a lot of times they will find somebody other than you, and they'll get wisdom that you've been sharing with them, and then they'll come to you like they taught it to you.
Oh yeah.
The best thing to do with loved ones and families is to live out your ideology and be a living example of how good what you advocate for is, and how much of a full life you'll live. A lot of times people will come up and like, I got this knowledge, I got this one, like Dr. Fubar. All of his relationships, to the extent that he shares them on social media, are dysfunctional as fuck. You had Irritated Genie, who was out here telling Black people how to live and how to liberate ourselves. And he had the Black decency movement and War on the Horizon. Then he go home and abuse and intimidate his whole family. So, if someone is looking at you, like you said, you saw me walking down the street. If you saw me walking down the street cursing my wife out or acting in a way that's inconsistent with what I advocate in public, people are always watching. People are always there. So if you are holistic health, revolutionary Pan-Africanism. If you're organizing, I remember I used to do Kwanzaa at my home, and I'd invite my whole family. I'd lay out vegan food. I'd do this little presentation about African culture, and I'd pick out a region to give them the history and the glory of our history and our future. And some of my relatives are receptive, some are indifferent, some rejected wholeheartedly, but I'm family with all of them. And I notice a lot of people, when they become conscious or woke or enlightened, they start to act like they're too good, or they don't want to spend time, or they don't want to reach out. So, I'm the best nephew, cousin, brother, father that I can be, in addition to doing my work in the community, organizing and advocating for revolution and liberation. So be there, be present, and be yourself. That's my advice for everything related to family and relationship. Be present and be yourself.
Amen. I know you ain't feelings, but you preaching though.
All right. I appreciate you. I got to get to the next call. And next time you see us, holler.
Will do.
All right, bro. Peace. Oh, thank you for being so patient, Don. Tofu. Don't blame the tofu. That's all on you.
Nah, bro, that message.
There's no such thing as bad tofu. There's only bad cooks.
I can't do it. I'm so sorry. Hey, so bro Diallo, I've seen your topic, and I definitely had to come on and ask you a question because, as far as the recreational use of nigga, as I like to phrase it, my specific problem with the Latinos, with the Latino community's use of it, and again the recreational use of it in that community is like, linguistic frames language as code, and if you bilingual, that means your brain got the capacity or has obtained the capacity to decipher two different codes. And you mean to tell me you can't go through all of them two different codes and figure out a different way to address, even playfully address one another, but I'll digress on that one to ask you the real question. So as a aspiring educator, Bro Diallo, that's trying to these schools or the Orange County, the California Orange County area, the schools, it's a heightened Latino population, right? And for example, I was just doing an entry-level job in a Costa Mesa high school that was mostly Latino, and the students would recreationally use nigga and stuff like that, but not and stuff like that. And I would get in their ass, and there was the only other black employee that was a younger security guard, not school police, but regular security guard. And it had gotten back to the students that I was checking in on the recreational use of nigga, and he was like, you just gotta ignore it and stuff like that. So as an aspiring educator, that's like,
hold on, Don. There's like some background scratching noise.
I'm so sorry. They got construction going on. I apologize.
I thought you were rolling a giant joint or something. It sounded like paper is scraping.
No. They literally have construction going on. They trying to, somebody just moved out, so
All right, no problem. It's just giving us a lot of feedback. But go on. I'm waiting for your question.
Yeah. So basically, again, as a person that's trying to, be a leader in these public schools, from that perspective, like, what do you do? What do you say? What do you do? Because honestly, I'm pretty. I don't want to say reactionary.
What would, first of all, Latino? What the hell is a Latino?
Oh, by the way, that's another thing. I seen somebody in the comments told me that you had a video on that. So
go back and watch that, number one, because they play these Latino and Hispanic. You want to know? Here's something curious. There's no Latinos in Latin America. There's no Hispanics in Latin America. They don't become Latino and Hispanic until they come to the United States. Guess what they are south of the border? They're white.
Mexican or
They're not Mexican. Mexico is broken up into various states. Oaxaca and the various places, and they don't identify as Mexican. Just like Africans, when they come here, they're African, but in across the Atlantic, they're Nigerian. You know, they're. I mean, I had a friend that was Kenyan, and he'd be like, you know, real talk. I don't consider myself Kenyan. I'm Luo. You know, I got a homie who's Ethiopian, but I'll look at him in an Oromo, and he'd be like, you know, I'm at heart. That's an Oromo. We ain't the same. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Y'all both Ethiopian. So anyway,
bro, Diallo, if I could interject, honestly, even as a person that's been taking these little, you know, these little basic introductory ethnic studies courses and stuff like that, I cannot say that. So I definitely say your video on Latinos or you know, that'll be helpful for me, because I honestly I still can't, you know, I can't call it.
right. Yeah, because I started using the word conquistadors. I had a Cuban friend, and I'm like, what do you are? You know, Ararat, Kalinago, or conquistador? And he's like, if I had to identify as one group, I would rather identify with the conquistadors. I'm a Christian, I have white skin, and the heritage and pride I feel of the conquest of the New World, that resonates with me. But we would be like, oh, he's brown, he's with us. When in his heart of hearts, you know, he'd rather be on the Nina, the Pinta, or the Santa Maria before he's in the Aztec pyramid, you know. So anyway, but in terms of that, I have a homeboy who lived here in Chicago. We were good friends. He moved out of state, and his son went to this school that was predominantly white when he left this state, and he moved to the east. And when his son, first day of freshman year, he's walking through the hallways, and the so-called Latino and Asian students are freely using the N-word. He shut the whole fucking school down, and his parents came there and shut that whole shit down. And you confront it. You know, the struggle is on all fronts. Our struggle is economic, political, ideological, cultural. It's lingual. We have to fight on the artistic fronts. So it is not appropriate. It's not acceptable. And you know goddamn well, and just think to yourself, if people were walking around the hallways saying kike or fag, what would those communities do? Well, he hangs around a lot of gay people, you know, so it ain't even that word. It's no slurs.
And
we gonna say it all, we're not gonna say none of it. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's pretty obvious that we know what to do. I just think we feel apprehensive because it's in the music, it's in this. I'm like, whatever, but it better not be in your mouth. Be like that guy from Dr. Wright's book. You can think it all you want, but I bet not hear it, and I bet not see it. So you know what to do. Come on now.
Bro, and for real, this is why, that's one of the reasons why I think all, I mean, and this is just a personal opinion of mine, I think all educators, especially within this current climate, I think all educators should pursue the legal studies, which is what I'll be doing immediately after undergrad. But I definitely appreciate that clarity. I literally should have it raised hell, to be completely honest, and you know, period, point blank. All right, Bro Diallo, Uhuru, the case is gonna be in Florida, September 3rd, y'all. Check us out.
All right, bro. Peace. Uhuru. All right, Q, you are our last caller. Question, comment, criticism.
I'm gonna try and make it quick. The first question. I remember there was a video where you were talking about anarchist feminism, and you threw a name out. I think it was like Sarah Taylor.
Sarah Taylor.
Yeah. Can you recommend any of her work or?
She used to write articles for the communist newspaper and the communist newsletter. I'm not sure if she.
Can you spell her name? Because when I try and type in her name, nothing really popped up.
Man, listen, I don't be be following these white women like that. Soon start. She's a revolutionary, anarcho-feminist, communist. There she is. It's SUN
SUN.
SARA Taylor. Sunsara Taylor. She got a Instagram.
Okay.
But yeah, she's an ultra leftist radical feminist. But
For
she,
sure.
I said I could agree when white women gonna be feminists if they're not anarcho-feminist or communist, because most feminists want equality with men. They want female CEOs, they want
Right.
female generals in the military, they want female billionaires, they want a female president. Where she is saying she wants to destroy those institutions and destroy those positions. She doesn't want male or female CEOs, bosses.
Right. And
I'm like, if you're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly.
right.
But
And
one thing she said, when the communists take over, she's going to ban pornography. So
oh
make
wow.
sure you're hitting hard drives for when the communist revolution ain't gonna be no more.
When the storm comes, be
Other than
prepared.
that, she's on point. She'd be knocking it out the park for a white woman. Let me say for a white woman. You know,
Are there any black anarchists, feminists that you know?
black anarcho-feminist.
Because usually the names thrown out are like, of course, Bell Hooks, Angela
But she
Davis.
wasn't an anarcho-feminist. Or a
I'm just saying,
communist.
like, the names that are thrown out.
Not as far as anarcho-feminism. I don't know of any black women who prescribe to that particular ideology. I'm sorry, I don't know that many white women. So,
Okay, well, I'll just use this.
but like
as
you said, you're on the right track with Dr. Bell Hooks and her views, but she's definitely a radical feminist, but I don't think she's an anarcho or a communist.
Okay. And then the last thing was just trying to give a little bit of context to Kendrick, because you said you haven't really kept up with him, and he's someone that in high school, like my introduction to him, and I think a lot of people's introduction to him was like, oh wow, this is a rapper in the midst of a rap genre that's the point that it's at is talking about capitalist motivations and heavy drug use. And then here you have this rapper from Compton, and he's talking about the things that are going on in his neighborhood, the killing and all this. And then you slowly see him progress into talking about like Section 80 and Reaganomics. And then I think that's where people put that conscious title on him, even though he wasn't digging deeper into, because I think even with him addressing Reaganomics, I think there was potential there, but somehow it turned into more inner self-reflection, social commentary, and then the Hebrew Israelite thing, and then it's like now we're saying Drake can't say the N-word, so it's like where are we on this journey? And it, even with your critique of him, it's kind of and I guess the more I read, like I noticed that Kendrick really hasn't I guess really been pointing to the things that I think he can really be capable of. If there was to be a voice for it, I guess it would be him due to his popularity. But yeah, I it's hard to watch,
Yeah. Well, he came up on my radar because I was hearing rumblings about him being a conscious artist and all that. So I just looked into it, and I'm like, this is not consciousness. This is just militant, reactionary militancy.
Yeah, and even when you posted Skip, what was the name of that song that you just played from Skip?
Atheist.
It's called Atheist. Okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
Him taking shots, pot shots, sneak dissing, atheist.
I thought I heard a couple shots in there, but
Yeah, he took mad shots. That's still my brother though.
yeah, but even just hearing something like that is kind of, I guess, refreshing for the point that I'm at in my life, as opposed to now when I might go back and listen to Kendrick and I'm like, there's really not anything there I can latch onto right now that I think can lead me into the broader ideals that I want to see realized. Like you said, as far as if we're in the position to make the difference, then it needs to be, we need to be moving in the right direction and doing right by the ancestors. So that's just the point that I'm at now.
Appreciate it. So you didn't have a question?
No, the only question was about Sunflower Taylor.
Yeah. All right, yeah. I didn't mean to turn you on, have you chasing white women around.
I don't think Umar would approve, man.
But there are plenty of revolutionary African women. I'm just saying I don't know any revolutionary African women who subscribe to anarcho-feminism. You got Baina Bellows, the Haitian revolutionary, of course, the great elder Dr. Marimba Ani. We got plenty of revolution. I don't want to say because you're like, oh, well, so it's just that specific, very particular ideological viewpoint. I'm not sure any sisters subscribe to it or even need to subscribe to it, because that's a different thing, Do
you think it's more, because even when I think back to when the political consciousness was, I guess, more broad or I guess bigger, I figured like there would be a group of Black women that, or it's like, is anarchist more of I guess a new thing, I guess?
Well, the problem is feminism is often inadequate to address African women's plight.
Okay.
Every one of the goals or aspiration of the mainstream feminist movement was achieved. African women will still be subjected to all the racialized components.
Right.
And white women have been a loyal and consistent ally of white men.
Right.
So the mainstream feminist movement has been more of a white women accurately asserting that we have been equal participants, but we haven't been equal recipients. Right. So the feminist movement is more about white women securing their share of the spoils than women forcing the white race to surrender the reins of power.
Right.
So to be a true feminist, you would have to betray your father, your brother, your uncle, your grandfather, and your own sons to be an anarcho-feminist. So anarcho-feminists seek to destroy all hierarchies, whereas feminists seek to join or elevate within the hierarchy. But if Black women, which is what my issue with a lot of Black feminists is, that because feminists, the fundamental goal of the feminist movement is to seek equality with men. So we can visualize what it would look like if white women secured full equality with white men.
Yeah.
Can you also visualize where the Black woman would be if she secured full equality with Black men? Now, there would be some relief. No doubt, because this is a sexist, misogynistic, patriarchal system. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't be any appreciable change in the lives of Black women, but Black women would still be under genocidal oppression if all the goals of feminism were reached, while leaving all other elements of this unjust hierarchy of capitalism and white hegemony in place, except for the gender component. And but it's not wrong, because a lot of Black men also believe that if Black men could be on par and equal, and many Black men will be like, yeah, just let me get mine. Forget the Black woman. She can take a back seat. The Black gays, Black disabled people, Black people who are not U.S. citizens. So there are many segments and reactions in our community where people say, well, I just want my demographic to get what it's due while leaving behind others. So my problem with feminism is, I think that feminism has a legitimate gripe. But my problem with feminism is that it's inadequate. Not that it's not justified, not that it's destroyed the Black family or all the other inaccurate bullshit that they say. My only problem with feminists in the feminist movement is that it is inadequate. I think it doesn't go far enough, but that's my same problem with the civil rights movement, or the Black entrepreneurial movement, and or even the Black reparations movement. So the solutions that we organize and propose have to be broader and holistic.
I guess what you're speaking to is like more of a self-determination, deciding what we want, not necessarily parallel to what white people have or what white women have. For sure. But that was it. I appreciate it each time.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right. That's the Bro Diallo broadcast. I got to mention, please support, go to the GoFundMe and make a donation to our Baltimore effort to get to Baltimore and to help lay the foundation so that the Earn Your Liberation crew can go on our national tour, basically. And also make sure you go, if you're going to be in Baltimore, go on Eventbrite and get tickets to the event, limited seating at Nomo Nomu. Like, share, subscribe to the Bro Diallo channel. Please help to contribute to sustain the channel. And don't forget, tune in Friday morning with the Bro Diallo, Geechee, and Jared for your Earn Your Liberation show. So much more to come. I thank y'all for tuning in, and I'll see y'all with Rational Radicals on the first and third Wednesday of every month. That's the Rational Radical show. Peace, and y'all have a good and safe evening.